Welcome back to the deep dive. We are cutting through the noise of complex European legislation today
We really are.
to deliver the definitive analysis of what might just be the single most important decision for digital privacy this year. We're talking about a fundamental clash.
A real collision course.
Yeah, between centralized surveillance goals and really deep-seated constitutional rights. For the last 2 years, this legislative specter has been hanging over every encrypted messaging service in Europe. It's the EU's proposed chat control regulation.
That's the one. It's caused a lot of anxiety.
Right. This proposal, it's sought to mandate universal digital monitoring across the whole bloc. But now, one of Europe's legal heavyweights has officially, thrown down the gauntlet. Okay, let's unpack this. Germany hasn't just expressed reservations like some others. No, it's issued a full constitutional rejection.
A really decisive move.
Exactly, creating what feels like a critical turning point in this whole fight.
And that rejection makes our mission today incredibly important, I think. We're doing a deep analysis of Germany's official stand against this EU chat control proposal.
We need to go beyond just the headlines.
Absolutely. Explain exactly the technical threat here, what's embodied by client-side scanning. We need to get into why Germany sees this as completely irreconcilable with its own basic law, the Grundgesetz.
Right.
And then what this monumental decision actually means for the future, for encryption, digital rights, secure tech, not just in Germany, but, across the entire EU.
And potentially globally even.
Potentially globally, yes. We really have to frame the German objection as more than just, say, political maneuvering. It's not just about EU politics.
Yeah.
This feels like a monumental victory for core democratic principles. It's a defense of confidential communication, which is fundamental. A defense of digital privacy as a basic right, and I think an essential defense of free expression in our increasingly digital world.
So Germany's basically saying these high legal protections, they have to apply online just as much as offline.
Exactly. That's the assertion. Equal protection in the digital realm.
Okay, so to really appreciate the gravity of this moment, we probably need to step back a bit. Revisit how this proposal was initially framed.
Yeah, the public messaging.
Right. The proposed EU chat control regulation, it was presented with this, indisputable, laudable goal, combating child sexual abuse material, CSAM.
And who could argue against that goal? No one.
Exactly. Who would ever argue against that? But the dilemma, it was always the methodology proposed.
The how. That's always been the sticking point.
The means of fighting this specific evil involved methods of mass surveillance that, let's be blunt, they compromise the security and privacy of every single user, not just suspects, everyone. And here's the key development we're focusing on. Germany has officially declared its opposition. Specifically, the German Justice Ministry came out strongly. The sources we've looked at indicate this isn't some minor political disagreement. It's really being treated as the critical turning point in this whole legislative saga.
A watershed moment.
Yeah. For people who believe in end-to-end encryption, this feels like a constitutional shield being deployed, finally.
And think about it. When Germany, the largest economy, and arguably one of the most legally rigorous nations in the EU, voices opposition based on its constitution.
It changes the game.
It changes the entire political dynamic. The immediate, profound effect is Germany affirming its constitutional commitment to the privacy of telecommunications.
Which is exceptionally strong in Germany.
It's one of the strongest constitutional safeguards for privacy anywhere in the world. They've effectively rejected a measure that would have treated every single digital communication as inherently suspect.
Guilty until proven innocent, digitally speaking.
Precisely. Thereby compromising the digital rights of every citizen in the EU, not just Germans.
So why does Germany's voice carry such, let's say, disproportionate weight here? Is it just their economic size, or is there a specific legal reason their constitutional objection creates such an immediate, powerful blockade?
Well, it's a bit of both, but it's primarily the legal weight. See, unlike a purely political argument, a constitutional objection based on the Grundgesetz, that's non-negotiable within German domestic law.
Ah, okay.
If the EU were to somehow pass this regulation as it was, Germany would face this impossible choice. Either ignore its own constitution, unthinkable, or face massive legal chaos at home.
Right.
So by making this stand early and so decisively, they're essentially forcing the entire EU legislative body to reckon with the constitutional bedrock of its most powerful member state, There's another angle, too. This move, it offers profound validation for the core business philosophy of German tech companies.
The ones built on privacy.
Exactly. Companies that have anchored their whole existence on the principle of end-to-end encryption, E2E key. Think about companies like Linkspreed. They operate under strict adherence to both the Grundgesetz and GDPR. They've always argued that privacy by design isn't just, the ethical thing to do, but it's actually legally mandated in Germany.
So this decision basically says you were right.
It confirms that their private by design business model is constitutionally protected. And crucially, that the government will defend that model against mass surveillance mandates. That's stability. That's crucial for fostering innovation in secure European technology.
Okay, now we need to dive into the technical core of this conflict. This is where we move past the legislative debates and really address the inherent technical risks involved.
Nuts and bolts.
Yeah. For our audience who follow this stuff, we need to go beyond just a simple definition. Here's where it gets really interesting, I think. The entire architecture of this proposed chat control, or sometimes called upload moderation, it mandates one specific mandatory technology, client-side scanning, CSS.
CSS, and that's the term people really need to understand.
Absolutely.
And this CSS, it's the technical sleight of hand, really, that often gets lost in the broader political discussion. Client-side scanning is fundamentally a requirement that tech providers implement mass surveillance.
Mass surveillance, not targeted.
No, not targeted at all. And critically, we aren't talking about surveillance happening on some remote server the company controls. We're talking about analysis taking place right there on your device.
My phone or laptop.
Your phone, your laptop, yes. Before the message even gets encrypted and sent. It's the technical mandate that effectively turns every private communication service, every chat app, every email client potentially, into an inescapable surveillance tool.
You used an analogy earlier, comparing it to a post office worker opening your letter on your kitchen table before you even seal the envelope. Let's maybe move past the analogy and talk about the technical reality. How does CSS actually work, and why does it fundamentally destroy E2EE, even if the claim is it's only looking for one specific type of threat, like CSAM?
That's an excellent question, because the framing is often misleading.
Yeah.
The common misconception is that, CSS is sort of benign because it's only designed to look for known bad, hashes these digital fingerprints of documented illegal material.
Right, that's the argument you hear.
But to perform that scan, the service provider must integrate code onto the user's device. Code that has the capability, the potential, to access and analyze the data in its unencrypted form. Plain text.
Oh.
That capability is the inherent vulnerability. It doesn't matter what it's supposed to look for today. The door is open. Think about how E2E works. The data is scrambled on the sender's device, completely unreadable in transit, and only unscrambled on the recipient's device. Only the endpoints can read it.
That's the whole point.
Exactly. CSS demands an intermediary step. It inserts a function that says, hold on, before you scramble this message, let my scanner take a look at the content.
While it's still readable.
Yeah. This creates what security experts call an oracle problem.
Mm-hmm.
Once you build that oracle, that piece of code on the device capable of reading the plain text you've created, essentially a universal backdoor.
A backdoor.
Yes. And that backdoor can, and history suggests eventually will, be repurposed or exploited by malicious actors, by state entities exceeding their mandate. The potential for abuse is enormous.
So let me get this straight. Even if the company promises, hand on heart, today the scanning is restricted only to known CSAM hashes, the underlying architectural change. The fact that the plain text is accessible to some piece of software on my device, that's what compromises the entire security promise of E2EE.
Precisely. That's the core technical reality. The security of E2EE is fundamentally a binary concept. Either the message is readable only by the intended endpoints, or it's potentially readable by some intermediate layer. CSS absolutely requires that intermediate layer.
There's no middle ground.
There really isn't, from a security architecture perspective. Moreover, the hash matching itself, it's not foolproof. It introduces its own vulnerabilities. What if a sophisticated adversary manages to poison the hash database used for scanning?
Ooh, right.
Or what if hash collisions where different pieces of data generate the same fingerprint are manipulated to deliberately flag completely innocent content?
So false positives could become a nightmare.
A huge nightmare. The system becomes prone to errors, subjecting innocent users to unwarranted investigation, maybe having their accounts flagged, simply because a piece of their private data accidentally shares the same digital fingerprint as some known illegal material. The risk of error in mass scanning becomes a terrifying prospect for individual liberty.
Okay, let's elaborate then on the second devastating implication you mentioned earlier. The sheer scale of this proposal, the mass surveillance aspect. This isn't just about a technical flaw. It feels like a radical shift in the relationship between the state and the individual citizen.
Oh, absolutely. The scale is what truly distinguishes CSS from traditional, targeted law enforcement surveillance. Think about it.
Okay.
Traditional surveillance requires a judicial warrant. It requires probable cause. It's strictly limited in scope to a specific suspect or communication channel.
Right, there are checks and balances.
There are supposed to be, yes. CSS bypasses all of that. It demands the indiscriminate, automated scanning of every message, every photo, every document sent by every user, regardless of suspicion.
Everyone's treated as a potential suspect all the time.
Exactly. It essentially destroys the presumption of innocence in the digital sphere. It institutionalizes a dragnet, a constant, pervasive monitoring of the entire population's private communications.
And this leads us directly to the third point, which you called perhaps the most insidious long-term threat, the danger of scope creep.
Yes. Scope creep is almost inevitable with technologies like this.
While the initial goal is clearly defined, fighting CSAM, which, again, everyone supports once you establish the infrastructure, the technology, and crucially, the legal precedent for mandatory spanning of private communication, where does it stop?
Well, history gives us a pretty chilling answer to that question. It rarely stops where it starts. Introducing mandatory CSS sets a legal and technical precedent. It fundamentally normalizes the idea of breaking encryption, or rather, scanning before encryption, on the client device.
Once that door is open.
Once that normalization occurs, it becomes far, far easier for future political agendas, whatever they may be, to demand extension of what's being scanned for.
Right.
Today, it's CSAM detection. Tomorrow, a government facing political pressure might demand scanning for copyrighted material infringements.
Or tax evasion evidence.
Or signs of political dissent. Or hate speech, defined however the government of the day chooses. Or terrorism-related keywords, anything that the government deems undesirable or illegal. As the source materials pointed out, the mechanism itself, once it's built and operational, becomes a political tool just waiting to be misused.
That's terrifying.
It is. And that's why Germany's stand wasn't just about protecting E2EE today. It was about preventing the wholesale erosion of democratic safeguards for future generations. The moment journalists can't protect their sources, or political opposition groups can't organize securely, or whistleblowers fear exposure, the foundational checks and balances of a free and open society really begin to crumble. Secure communication isn't a luxury. It's essential infrastructure for democracy.
Okay, so given the gravity of this technical compromise, the undermining of E2EE, the mass surveillance aspect, the scope creep danger, it becomes clear why this couldn't just be solved with, say, minor legislative tweaks or adjustments.
No, it was fundamental.
It really required a complete constitutional rejection. So what specific legal framework did Germany invoke here? And what makes their constitution, the Grundgesetz, such an effective shield in this digital battle?
Germany's objection is rooted directly in its foundational principles of liberty. These aren't abstract ideas. They were established explicitly to prevent the kind of horrifying state overreach Germany experienced in the 20th century.
A direct response to history.
A direct, conscious response. The German Justice Ministry was unequivocal. They stated that mandatory, general, and indiscriminate surveillance of private communications is fundamentally incompatible with the German basic law, the Grundgesetz. That wasn't a suggestion or a point for debate. It was presented as a constitutional ultimatum.
Can you walk us through the core rights from the Grundgesetz that are specifically at stake here? How did they become so strongly protected in German law?
Absolutely. The first and probably the most potent weapon in this specific fight is the inviolability of telecommunications secrecy. That's Article 10 of the Grundgesetz, known as the Fernmeldegeheimnis.
Fernmeldegeheimnis, okay.
It essentially ensures that the state cannot access, monitor, or record any form of telecommunication, whether that's an old-fashioned phone call, a modern text message, or an encrypted chat, unless highly specific, targeted, and judicially sanctioned exceptions apply. Very narrow exceptions.
Right.
And the historical context here is just critical and often gets overlooked outside Germany. Following the pervasive surveillance and manipulation by the Nazi regime and later by the Stasi in East Germany, the framers of the Basic Law in West Germany were absolutely determined to enshrine the privacy of communication as a core safeguard against any future slide into totalitarianism.
So it's not just a nice-to-have privacy law.
No. Fernmeldegeheimnis is not just a policy preference. It is a profound historical lesson codified into supreme law. CSS, by mandating that communication providers actively police the content before it's encrypted, directly violates the very essence of that historical guarantee. It forces the provider to break the secrecy the state itself is forbidden from breaking without cause.
So it's not just that the state is barred from intercepting the communication directly.
Correct.
It's that the service providers, the platforms, are constitutionally barred from being forced to become agents of the state's indiscriminate monitoring. They can't be deputized for mass surveillance.
That's exactly it. The constitutional duty is on the state to respect that secrecy. And by extension, the state cannot mandate private companies to act as its proxies in violating that secrecy for everyone, all the time. The constitutional commitment is to the integrity of the communication path itself.
Okay, that's Article 10. What was the second major right cited in this objection?
That would be the right to informational self-determination. It's often linked to the general right to privacy under Article 2 of the Grundgesetz, combined with Article 1.
Informational self-determination.
Yes. This is the fundamental right of every individual to control the disclosure and use of their own personal data. It's about personal autonomy in the information age. This principle was famously solidified by the German Constitutional Court back in the 1980s, actually, in response to census data collection concerns.
Interesting.
CSS completely removes that control. It dictates that your private data must be handed over, unencrypted, to a scanning mechanism before you even send it. It effectively makes the state, or the service provider acting under state mandate, the ultimate non-consensual arbiter of what happens to your data before it even receives its promised E2E protection. You lose control.
Wow. So it sounds like Germany is essentially declaring the EU proposal flat out unconstitutional, according to German supreme law. That's a massive move within the EU structure. How does this connect to the broader European legal architecture, especially the GDPR, which is supposed to be the EU's flagship data protection law?
It connects very directly and powerfully. Germany's action here is a potent affirmation of the entire European commitment to strong data protection, a commitment really epitomized by the General Data Protection Regulation, the GDPR.
Right.
The GDPR established stringent requirements for things like data minimization, only collect what you need. Purpose limitation, only use data for the specific reason you collected it. And having a clear legal basis for any data processing.
Principles that CSS seems to ignore.
Utterly undermines them. A mass surveillance mandate like CSS, scanning everything just in case, flies in the face of data minimization or purpose limitation. It processes everyone's data without a specific individual legal basis. So by rejecting the proposal on its own constitutional grounds, Germany is also acting as a necessary critical voice of reason within the EU system itself. It's ensuring that the EU's own legacy as a global leader in user rights, built on things like GDPR, remains intact and isn't hollowed out by security exceptions.
Protecting the protector, in a way.
In a way, yes. It sends a crucial signal. Policy goals, even important ones like fighting CSAM, must be subject to the EU's own rule of law. And that includes fundamental rights principles like necessity and proportionality.
Proportionality seems key here.
Absolute key. CSS, because it's indiscriminate and compromises all communications to potentially find illegal content in a tiny fraction, clearly fails the test of proportionality. It's using a massive sledgehammer that breaks everything, where targeted constitutionally sound measures are required. Germany's rejection confirms that the legal certainty demanded by both the GDPR and the Grundgesetz remains a prevailing standard for digital rights within the EU framework. It sets the bar high.
So this strong constitutional protection provided by Germany, it creates a stable, secure legal environment for users, obviously. But it also seems to do the same for the tech companies operating within its borders, right? How does this decision immediately impact the competitive landscape, especially for those privacy-first companies we talked about?
Oh, it's an enormous boost, a huge validation. For companies like Linkspreed, for example, who've built their entire infrastructure, their whole value proposition, on the premise that privacy is non-negotiable.
Right.
This isn't just good PR.
Yeah.
It's fundamental confirmation that the rule of law in their home base actually supports their business model. Their core argument that confidential communication is vital for press freedom, for civil society, for whistleblowing, for basic democratic functions, that argument has just been powerfully endorsed by the state itself.
So what are the concrete principles that these kinds of ethical tech companies can now confidently build upon, knowing this constitutional shield is firmly in place?
Well, they can build upon the principle of trust that's rooted in both technical and legal guarantees. That's crucial.
Okay.
Firstly, they know they must maintain robust E2EE. And critically, ensure there is strictly no central point of access to plaintext data. That design prevents easy demands from state agencies looking for bulk data.
Makes sense.
Secondly, they can now really emphasize as a competitive advantage that operating under the strict dual oversight of the German Grundgesetz and the EU's GDPR provides arguably the highest level of legal protection for user data globally. That's a major selling point for users seeking genuine security and privacy.
Yeah, that's a strong claim.
And thirdly, this creates genuine confidence to innovate under a privacy-by-design mandate. They aren't constantly looking over their shoulder, worried about being forced to build surveillance backdoors in the next legislative cycle. Instead, they're incentivized, legally and ethically, to build systems that structurally minimize data collection and maximize user control from the ground up. This contrasts really sharply with environments where tech design is constantly being compromised by shifting government surveillance demands.
Okay, this brings us to a really crucial transition point, I think. Germany has provided the legal certainty by blocking the immediate threat of CSS. Now, how are private companies like Linkspreed responding? Are they just breathing a sigh of relief, or are they actively working to fill the secure space that the law has protected, building the future of secure communication?
That's the key pivot, isn't it? The victory over the CSS proposal is fundamentally defensive. It stops something bad. The necessary next step has to be offensive in the sense of proactively building new, decentralized, secure infrastructure.
Right, building alternatives.
Exactly. And to celebrate this landmark victory for digital freedom and free expression, and also to actively foster that kind of positive development, Linkspreed is specifically stepping up to empower developers and entrepreneurs, the ones who want to champion secure, private, and open communication models.
And the mechanism for this empowerment, as I understand it, is direct financial support, helping people build the next generation of secure platforms, specifically helping them build their own social network securely, privately, openly.
That's exactly right. The specific action they're taking is a really significant boost to the free credits they offer. These credits are available for new registrations who want to start developing their own social network infrastructure using Linkspreed's platform.
So this isn't just about getting more users on their platform.
No, it's more strategic than that. It's framed as an investment in the necessary decentralized infrastructure. Infrastructure that serves as a robust, user-respecting counterpoint to the massive centralized surveillance models that the German government thankfully just helped block.
Okay, let's put a number on that commitment because it sounds quite substantial. The standard free credit Linkspreed usually offers is what, around $12?
That's the standard, yes.
And that's being dramatically increased for a limited time to a very generous $100.
Correct. A full $100 in credits for all new signups who require it. It's a significant jump.
And this enhanced offer, it's running for the entire month.
For the entire month, yes. The idea is to maximize the investment in privacy-first development right now, in the wake of this crucial decision. And think about the strategic importance of that investment. $100 in credits. That allows developers, maybe small teams, students, nonprofits, entrepreneurs, to really experiment, to build prototypes, to deploy open source, truly secure platforms, without that immediate crushing pressure of massive capital expenditure.
Lowers the barrier to entry significantly.
Hugely. It fosters a future where the next generation of social networking, of online community building, prioritizes the user's fundamental rights from the very beginning, leveraging the robust legal protection provided by the Grundgesetz and GDPR to ensure their service can genuinely promise freedom from unwarranted inspection, freedom from the insidious threats posed by things like client-side scanning technologies. It's really an investment in building the technical architecture of digital freedom.
Okay, so what's fascinating here, as you said, is that while Germany's objection feels like an extremely powerful blockade,
It really does.
Yeah. The legislative process in the EU is notoriously complex. We probably shouldn't assume that the proponents of mass surveillance have just packed up their bags and gone home.
Oh, definitely not. That would be naive.
Is there any credible legal or political path remaining for the EU to try and push some version of this mandate through, maybe under a different name or using a slightly different technical mechanism they claim isn't CSS?
That is the critical challenge we face right now. The proposal isn't officially dead until the entire legislative cycle concludes, which can take time. Proponents might absolutely try to repackage the surveillance elements.
How could they do that?
Well, perhaps by claiming a newly defined technical standard doesn't constitute a general monitoring obligation under EU law, trying to find semantic loopholes. However, Germany's very public, very firm constitutional declaration has fundamentally raised the barrier to passage dramatically.
Made it much harder.
Much, much harder. Any subsequent proposal, no matter how it's dressed up, would have to withstand incredibly intense scrutiny against the strict proportionality tests guaranteed by German constitutional law and arguably by European fundamental rights law as well. The legal ground is shifted. And critically, Germany's unequivocal rejection provides significant political cover and strong legal justification for other EU member states, the ones that were already expressing deep skepticism about compromising E2E.
They're not alone anymore.
Exactly. They now have the EU's largest member state standing with them on solid constitutional ground.
Okay, so who are the key players, the other countries we should be watching now, who might feel more emboldened to really solidify their opposition alongside Germany?
We definitely need to pay close attention to the Netherlands, Poland, and Austria. These three nations had previously voiced strong reservations, particularly about the impact on encryption. Germany's constitutional stand shifts the balance of power within the EU Council quite dramatically. It transforms the debate away from a somewhat moralizing security argument, you must fight CSAM at all costs, even privacy costs, towards a non-negotiable constitutional argument. You simply cannot violate fundamental rights like this, regardless of the policy goal.
Which is a much harder argument for proponents of the regulation to counter legally.
Much harder, especially within the EU's rule of law framework. It makes it significantly more difficult for Brussels to try and force a consensus that overrides these fundamental rights concerns.
So the message being sent to Brussels, and maybe even globally, seems pretty clear then. Digital security and fundamental rights, they can't be sacrificed on the altar of other policy goals, however worthy.
That's the core message, yes.
But what does this mean in terms of actually finding solutions to the very real problem the regulation was intended to address, combating CSAM online? It doesn't make that problem go away.
No, it absolutely doesn't, and that's crucial. The message isn't do nothing. It's a call for intelligence, for precision, and for proportionality in the methods used.
Right.
The message is that effective measures to combat serious crime must be targeted, they must be precise, and they must be constitutionally sound. Law enforcement techniques need to operate within the existing boundaries of strong encryption.
Using existing tools.
Using proven, judicially sanctioned methods, like targeted investigations based on probable cause, warrants for specific data, infiltration of criminal groups, cooperation with service providers for targeted data access under strict legal oversight. The response cannot be universal, preemptive surveillance that jeopardizes the digital security and fundamental rights of an entire continent. Germany's decision champions the idea that technological neutrality is essential. The state shouldn't be dictating technological design in ways that deliberately weaken security for everyone.
Right.
Instead, the focus should shift towards leveraging cryptography and technological innovation responsibly to combat crime while preserving rights. There's a concept often called responsible cryptography, which explores this, finding smart, targeted ways, not brute force surveillance.
And for the ethical technology companies like Linkspreed, the commitment has to remain equally strong, doesn't it? They can't just rely on the government's shield.
Absolutely. They have a continuing role. Linkspreed, for instance, has publicly committed to continuing to monitor the situation closely, to advocate for privacy-preserving solutions, and crucially, to keep providing secure encrypted communication tools. This constitutional victory confirms they have the solid legal foundation they need to continue building robust tools that allow users to communicate freely and without fear of unwarranted inspection. The fight continues on the development front, too. #DagOutro.
Okay, so let's try to synthesize our deep dive today. It feels like Germany, using the formidable shield of its Grundgesetz, a constitution literally shaped by historical opposition to state overreach, has successfully protected a cornerstone of a free society.
That's a good way to put it.
The right to encrypted private communication. And this move, it didn't just shield German citizens. It seems to have created a major, perhaps even insurmountable barrier against this specific model of widespread, indiscriminate surveillance for the entire European bloc.
So what does this all really mean for you, the listener? I think this decision confirms, first and foremost, that the rule of law remains paramount, even in the digital age. Even when policy aims are critical, like protecting children, the methods chosen must respect fundamental constitutional rights.
The ends don't justify all means.
Exactly. It sets a global benchmark, really, suggesting that digital security and privacy must be viewed as prerequisites for, not barriers to, modern freedom and safety. And importantly, this legal victory is now being translated directly into tangible technical action. The decision affirmed that technological innovation, particularly in secure, decentralized platforms, can actually thrive under strong data protection laws. It's not an obstacle.
Right.
And that's precisely why the celebration we discussed, the increase of those free credits by Linkspreed from $12 up to $100 is so strategically important right now. It's not just a discount, it's direct financial empowerment.
Fueling the builders.
Fueling the builders, yes.
Okay.
Empowering those who want to build the secure social networks, the secure communication tools that serve as genuine alternatives to the surveillance-heavy models currently dominating the market. It connects the legal win to practical development.
Which leads us to our final thought for you today. Considering the current, often intrusive surveillance models that we see proliferating globally, and given that Germany has now confirmed that strong legal certainty for E2E does exist, at least within its influential jurisdiction, what role do you think privacy by design companies empowered by these kinds of constitutional victories and maybe helped by resources like that boosted $100 credit? What role will they play in shaping the global standards for digital freedom over the next decade? Are we potentially witnessing the birth of a truly secure, genuinely privacy-first digital architecture, perhaps led by Europe?
It's a compelling challenge, isn't it? A call to action, really, for the entrepreneurs, the developers, the users listening now, urging all of us to actively build the future we actually want to inhabit online.
Thank you for joining us for this crucial deep dive into digital sovereignty, constitutional shields, and the ongoing battle for the architecture of a secure future. We definitely encourage you to explore the specifics of Germany's Grundgesetz, Article 10 especially, and the technical vulnerabilities of client-side scanning further if this piqued your interest. We'll see you next time on The Deep Dive.